So, before we start, I just want to warn everyone that when Amanda and I were preparing for this, we spent 2.5 hours and got about halfway through your career. So, don't go anywhere. It's going to be interesting. So, but first of all, I mean, I'm just trying to think. It's on the. So the title of this is from Tyke to Toon. And Jasper said to me, he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, it's relevant." He said, "No, but no one's going to get it." So, a tyke is
a Geordie.
No, other way around.
Sorry, a Toon is the Geordie.
A tyke is someone from
Yorkshire.
Right, I'm glad we got that.
From Tyke.
Tyke to Toon.
I knew the Newcastle one.
Yeah, so the Toon we'll get to a bit later, but so to go back to the beginning, so born in Yorkshire, in
Yorkshire.
Ripon?
I am actually born in Doncaster, which is South Yorkshire.
Okay.
My husband always.
And Dad was in the theme parks business, is that right?
Yep. Dad was an entrepreneur and built a theme park Lightwater Valley.
Still there?
It is still there, yes, under someone else's ownership.
And Mum was a competitive show jumper.
She was an Olympic show jumper in the British team.
Okay, so no pressure on you then, right?
Not at all, yeah.
Okay, so and so that sort of upbringing, what sort of lessons did you take away from your childhood in terms of how that would shape your career?
I think my dad was very...
One second. Can we close the door, please? It's very noisy. Thank you.
My dad was very entrepreneurial, but he was always very honest with me. He said, "Look, you're a woman. You're from a Yorkshire family." They had a small estate, which my dad actually turned into a theme park with a lot of help from the banks. To a big loan, a mortgage on the land. He built a theme park to try and bring income into the estate. But he said, well, one thing that I am going to tell is you have to go out and marry well because your brother will inherit the entire estate. You won't inherit anything from us. So that was a kind of, I think I was about 5 or 6 when...
So an enlightened man then, I mean...
Yeah. So it was. So then that drove me, I think.
Okay, and so no background in banking. How did that come about?
So, I mean, I was at school in Yorkshire. I did my A-levels in 1 year. Went to Cambridge very early. Went up at 16, and kind of got a huge amount of support from Cambridge University. Later on, they invested in my second business, and I loved. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I still am. Those genes are very much inside. My dad's genes are very much inside me. So banking was a sort of a flip side to when we wanted to build our businesses, and I successfully built a restaurant called Stocks. When I was about 24, I got Businesswoman of the Year. In the Cambridge area, and I sort of built Stocks, and then I built a Qton Forum with Cambridge University, which was a kind of conference centre. And
then a bit more than that, because it was also a incubation,
yes,
which was somewhat ahead of its time, because obviously that's a big thing now with Cambridge, but this was in 2000.
Yeah, it was about 2000.
Yeah.
So we built a conference centre, hotel, and then we had a thing called the Darwin Fund, which was taking IP out of the university and commercializing it and trying to understand how you did that. And that IP was very much based around biotechnology and the silicon pen. And we did some incredible stuff on chip design, though, with ARM Holdings that we had, made some very, I got to know the team around ARM, so that was great. And they would come visit me all their time. We built, funny enough, they'd hold their board meetings in my restaurant. And because they were very confidential, they would say, I don't want anyone else in this room apart from you, Amanda. And I was waitressing. So I would go around listening to all of these quiet board meetings, and I think I probably probably traded a few armchairs quite successfully.
Now, obviously, one of the things that you're known for is essentially having the keys to the kingdom, and by the kingdom I refer to the Middle East. But the origins of that actually go back to your time at Cambridge. Just give a bit of a background around that.
So the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi visited the Q-Ton Forum, the Cambridge Science Park, and came and visited with our senior bursar and looked at the businesses I created. He came to my restaurant, and then we took him around the forum, and then we went in and saw all of the incredible work we'd done in venture capital funds, and they weren't particularly called venture capital in those days, but it was basically early stage investment. And they loved what we were doing, and they invited me to come to Abu Dhabi and look at how we could do a similar thing there. And we did that, and I flew over to Abu Dhabi, fell madly in love with the country, and I was so excited about this was a young country trying to make change. Obviously, with deep oil reserves, but at that point, that wasn't.
But it was broader than that, because I mean, it goes back to, in fact, horse racing, was the initial draw, because it's still a big passion of a lot of the Middle Eastern rulers, and they used to come to your restaurant when they weren't at Newmarket. Is that right?
Yes, Sheikh Mohammed from the Dubai family, he would come with his family. Frankie Dettori would come, and so they would all come to the restaurant. I'd be looking after them at night, and then I would go back and visit them in Dubai. So it was a really special time. I was in a very unique position that I got access to. We had the King of Jordan visited as well. We had some of our Qatari friends, so I was going in. But the then profits of my restaurant, then we invested into a little business called Christos, which was a broker-dealer, and I became regulated for that business. Christos then we took into Abu Dhabi, and
So that was the banking beginning, right? Okay. Now, I mean, if I was going to describe a banker that would be successful in the Middle East, I wouldn't necessarily describe a woman in her late 20s, early 30s. I mean, it has historically at least, a reputation for being not particularly friendly to women, but that wasn't your experience at all.
Quite the reverse, and especially with, I have found it all my life that any prejudice that I've had is certainly, it was never in the Gulf. I think there was a feeling of perhaps because I was a woman, there wasn't so much expected of me. So when I did do well in that environment, I stood out from the crowd. I think that was helpful. I'm quite good at opening doors, but once your doors are open, you have to deliver. And then over time, by the time I'd done the Barclays trade, and
we'll get to that.
Okay. Once over time I had my track record, then it stood for itself. But initially, everybody was so supportive and treated me like family.
I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. I just referred to the Middle East, but it's a complex area. Can you give some insight as to the dynamics there and how it works?
Well, I mean, when I first started working there, I worked a lot in Libya, funny enough, which is, I don't think we've talked about this. I was working for Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed at a company called we had a rig company called Challenger that he owned a stake in, and we were developing a sort of a large investment fund for him that he owned most of, and this rig business was in most of the rigs were in Libya, and I had to go and visit and assess them and understand were they there, what assets were there. could we move them from, you know, the places they were in Libya down to another place? And I arrived there not speaking Arabic, and I remember my first meeting having damp hair from the shower in the morning, and I was told never ever go into a meeting with damp hair. You know, it was really bad, really culturally bad, you were dressed wrong and everything else, so I took a while.
But I mean, how do you balance the different, you know, obviously countries, rural families, religious sects, tribes? I mean, how does that play out for you? I mean, have you been able to navigate that clearly successfully?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Shall I talk a little bit about Newcastle, or
you're jumping ahead? Let's stay there.
Ahead. Okay. So we navigate. These are relationships. People are people, and I think sometimes you forget that whatever someone's background, I think we have to remember we're dealing with people. So treat people with integrity, with trust, with respect, and be respectful of people's cultural, you know, backgrounds, and I found that you get a lot further if actually you just try to understand where you are and be prepared to change and moderate your own behaviour.
Okay, so that's all background to the deals. Now, obviously, what we're going to spend most time talking about is football, but you know, I think it would be remiss for me to overlook that you have actually done some reasonably sizable deals outside of football. You've worked with major hotel groups, the Mayborn Group, with Bawa, who are one of the big developers from Abu Dhabi. But there was a small matter of a rescue of Barclays in 2008, £3.25 billion that you raised as a 34-year-old. Remarkable. I mean, you know, you just did that on the back of an envelope, or?
Well, one thing about anyone will know: when you're young, you don't have the fear of failure. So I think the great thing about doing it when I was so young was that I had huge. Well, I probably have guts today, but when I look back, it was
Chutzpah, I think.
Chutzpah. Yeah. So the financial crisis was. Sorry, can someone just shut the door? Sorry. Thank you. So the financial crisis was, you know, it was the most terrifying. You know, I'm old enough to remember there's a lot of young people here, but it was quite shocking. And the debt markets had totally collapsed. There was CDS rates were through the roof. There was absolutely no availability of liquidity. Lehman's had just collapsed in September, and we'd spent the year before working with His Highness, looking at opportunities. One of them was a big property.
Sheikh Mansour.
Sheikh Mansour, yes, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed. We just bought Man City Football Club for him.
Yeah.
So, yep, just before. So we'd just done that. So his name had just started to get into the press, but really not to do with banking or finance or anything else. When we were doing the deal, I remember I was in a lot of meetings on looking at other assets, and I said to His Highness, the market is so frothy, it's so overblown, this is really scary. And we pulled out of two deals. One was a big property transaction called Trillium, and we said, I just think at the moment we need to step back. So we stepped back, we looked. Once Lehman's had gone bankrupt, we thought there was a huge opportunity to make an investment into the UK. I'm obviously a Brit and very proud Brit, and wanted to do something special in the UK. And we thought there was an opportunity to recapitalise the banks. It was clear then that the government was about to come through the door. And we approached Barclays and said, you know, we can put a rescue package. They were trying to raise what we call Tier 1 capital, and Tier 1 capital is the safety capital around the bank. So we thought, because the Qatar state had already made an investment into Barclays, we thought there would be an opportunity for a consortium led by PCP, and myself and my partners to invest in the bank.
Amazing. Okay, football. Why football?
Loved football. I'm just a DNA of football in every bone in my body.
And shockingly, I think for anyone who's from Yorkshire, you are actually a Liverpool fan, a Lancastrian club.
Yeah.
Okay, and there is some history there because there was a brief flirtation with the idea of acquiring Liverpool.
Yes. So was it before?
Yeah, 2007.
Yeah, 2007. Sorry, before we did the Barclays recapitalisation, we started looking at Liverpool Football Club, and there was an opportunity to buy the club for about 250 million.
Was this before Hicks and Gillette? Okay.
It was with the owners before Hicks and Gillette. So this was the old owners taking it on from them, and we pitched with Dubai International Capital. My colleague Samir Al-Ansari, who had just acquired Madame Tussauds, so DIC were working with us and making a lot of investment into sports. We thought again this would be a fantastic opportunity to buy into football. It was obviously before Man City, and we were both Liverpool fans. So Samir was, I was, so it was exciting. So anyway, we did try and buy it. We didn't, and that was it.
Which led to another opportunity in 2008, and I think certainly anyone that I guess has a shorter than 15-year history in football. I mean, Manchester City was not the club it was today, and in fact, at the time, Thaksin Shinawatra was the owner, and then he had I think we can understate it, a little bit of trouble. Had to flee Thailand in a hurry, came to the UK, and then found that all his assets were frozen. So, was that an opportunistic situation? I mean, or is this something that you've been tracking?
No, actually, Thaksin did approach us with his advisor to lend him some money. So we were asked to look at lending him 100 million. All his money was frozen, so we thought this was opportune. And we actually started doing due diligence on the club, and I said, this is potentially a better deal than lending him money, which was quite complex anyway. We may as well just buy the club. And
the relationship, I guess, you built with Sheikh Mansour meant that it was a relatively easy deal to bring.
I think initially we were all excited about probably going back to Liverpool, because Liverpool was a huge brand. And I said Man City could be built into a massive brand in time, but it wasn't going to be instantaneous. Anyway, we did work. We did buy 90% of the club. The one thing that he wanted when we bought the club, I remember this was, I'd never done a football transfer, in my life. So he said, I want to buy the club, but you've got to buy a superstar player. And this was at the end of August, just before the transfer window shut, and we had to get the deal done, papered, from my heads of terms into something that worked in about 2 days, and the player Robinho bought, and then medical.
Which is difficult to sort of state now, that was, I mean, to say incongruous would be a massive understatement. The idea that Robinho, world superstar, would somehow sign to play for Manchester City. I mean, I've read the reports going back. I mean, I think Vincent Kompany thought that it was just a hoax.
Yeah, we actually, before we bought Robinho, I did ring up the Liverpool guys, and they had a player called Torres. And I said, by the way, we're just about to buy Man City. Do you want to can we buy Torres from you? And I think the owners thought I was, smoking some kind of special, whatever.
Anyway, so you did the deal, and then, to the outside world, you were sort of out of football for a while, but that wasn't necessarily the case, because in the back of your mind, you had another idea, and that became Newcastle. But that deal took 4 years to pull together.
Yeah, 4 years. So you're jumping along. So
we've got a lot to get through, Amanda,
okay.
and less than 10 minutes. So
Newcastle was an absolute love affair. We were dying again. Wanted to try wanted to buy Liverpool. We started renegotiating with the current owners, which are the owners that own it now. We got to a point where we'd agreed about a £1.6 billion price. They chipped the price and said, no, we don't want to sell for that. We'll sell for a higher price. So we thought, you know what, we'll go to a Liverpool-Newcastle game. We arrived, and before this, we'd had this sort of aeroplane had flown over the St James's Stadium with my kind of name on and saying, please save our club. So we thought, let's go up to Newcastle. Murdad and I walked into the door, and it was just like a love affair. It was just the most incredible place, amazing community, great fans, absolutely everything.
And you deliberately chose PIF, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. What was the rationale for that?
Well, Newcastle at the time was pretty unloved. It hadn't had any investment at all, except for into a few players from Mike Ashley, the old owner. And so we felt that we needed people with deep pockets, very patient capital. We would take 10% of the equity, or 20% as we eventually did with the Rubens, and we wanted a partner that will come in and provide, a long-term patient capital. And we thought the Saudi family, Saudi are a very football-loving nation, and they're a very young population. And so we thought actually the demographic was brilliant. The Geordies would fall in love with Saudi, and Saudi would fall in love with the Geordies.
But I mean, to put it mildly, there were at least a couple of obstacles along the way. Jamal Khashoggi being one, and then there was an issue with the EPL rights. Can you talk a little about that, particularly the rights situation?
So the rights issue was a complex one. First of all, there was a lot of pushback from other Premier League owners. Nobody wanted PIF-backed sovereign wealth fund owning another club in the Premier League. And then the second big problem was the fact that the Middle East Asia rights were owned by beIN Sport. There was a blockade between Qatar and Saudi. So I think a huge commercial blockade. And then the rights that were meant to be distributed so that we could all watch our Premier League in
the Middle East,
were actually being pirated
by the Saudis.
Right. So this was really
not ideal.
Not ideal.
And so in addition to structuring a deal to buy a football club, you had to exercise your powers of diplomacy to ensure that situation did not continue. And, a deal was eventually done.
Yep.
And then, to the dismay of most Geordies, within 2 years you were gone. And I think people were scratching their heads as to why. Can you give some insight into that?
Well, I think when we were there, it took 4 years to buy. We took the club from almost relegation, all the way to Champions League, and we ran it daily. My husband and I did everything. We were CEO, we were football director, we were buying, trailing all the players. We were doing pretty much everything. And that meant the management team there that we were slowly putting in place didn't have the chance probably to do the work that eventually the board needed them to do. And Murdad and I felt that we had a 10-year-old boy, and he is based in London, and we were barely seeing him. So we wanted to go back. We had, a very super offer, but equally so it was heartbreaking. It was a very hard decision.
Well, hold that thought, and I haven't told you I'm going to do this. I'm not sure if it's actually going to work, but one of the biggest Geordie fans in Asia would normally be here, and actually will probably be introducing us. So there's a message here from a guy called Dominic Lau, who unfortunately can't be with us. He's in Thailand, but I just wanted to play you this.
Hi Amanda, Dom Lau here, coming at you from Hong Kong. I regret that I can't be with you in person at the All That Matters conference, as I was really looking forward to meeting you in person. But if I have to give you this message via video, then so be it. Amanda, thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you and your husband Merdad have done for my beloved Newcastle United. Your passion for business, your compassion for the club's rich history, and your devotion to the loyal Geordie fans all around the world is something that has not only transformed the club's fortunes, but has lifted and changed the spirit of Geordies everywhere. And even though it's only been 2.5 short years, you have left a mark on the club that will never be forgotten. And know this, you will always be, to us, considered a true Geordie and known in our hearts fondly as Warmandy. So on behalf of Geordies everywhere around the world, thank you. You've done more for us than you will ever know. Enjoy the rest of the conference. How are the lads?
I don't know, for example, that John Henry gets that kind of thanks from the Liverpool fans. And as a Tottenham fan, I know that Daniel Levy certainly didn't. So you've now left the club, and yet that sort of message is universal. Well, you did something right.
It's extraordinary. I mean, the Geordies and Newcastle fans, that was the greatest thing about the club, because they've just got the greatest fans in the world, and we're just so privileged to work with them all the time.
So having betrayed myself as a Tottenham fan, I would be remiss, because if the press is to be believed, our club next, maybe not.
I hope so. Looking at my husband who's going, don't say anything. No.
But it would be fair to say you've not finished with football.
We have definitely not finished with football, we're really excited about trying to get into another Premier League team, probably someone that you know quite closely, and we're very excited about.
Well, it's interesting because when I posted on LinkedIn to say I was coming, and I was inundated with messages from fans of other clubs saying, when you're interviewing Amanda, could you please ask if she might consider buying our club? Sheffield Wednesday being one of them, I have to mention. I mean, there's no shortage of suitors, and obviously Wrexham's now gone. So, would you consider taking a club from a lower level?
I think we'd look at any opportunity that's presented to us, but I think we've got a pretty clear idea of where we want to invest at the moment.
Well, on which subject? I mean, again, I would not doing my job. So, you mentioned it in the first panel, but I mean, I think this is the first time you can actually publicly say that you are now, as PCP, launching a dedicated sports fund. Do you want to talk about that?
So we wanted to take the success that we'd had with Newcastle, and we wanted to do it on a broader base across many assets. So we've done a lot of individual investments in sports before, but we've never really done a collective. And we've been kind of frustrated by that because we see so many opportunities. What we're great is, I think we're good at asset management on the ground. So we wanted to do something that would combine all those skills. So we're doing a dedicated sports and media fund that will invest into some key assets.
So not just clubs, it's all properties adjacent. So it could be luxury brands, technology platforms, media platforms. $500 million minimum.
500 million minimum.
So if anyone's got any spare change in their pockets.
Please come and see us.
And it's agnostic in terms of territories and sports. So anything in Asia?
We love Asia. So we think Asia's a really exciting market, especially in gaming, and we're just so excited by all the things. We've done a lot of work on the influencer side as well, and content distribution. So and
actually, I mean, obviously the Sheikh Mansour got the intention around Man City, but it's a little known fact that there are actually 2 Chinese minority shareholders in Man City.
There are, yeah.
CITIC and CMC. I imagine they're reasonably happy with what you did there. So maybe you want to go knock on their doors?
I think we should knock on their door, definitely.
Okay. Well, Amanda, thank you very much. I wish we did have another 2.5 hours to get into everything in more depth, but thank you for coming here, and good luck with the fund.
Thank you, John, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for listening so patiently.